Cignetti said he's noticed some of his seniors have been sentimental coming up to this last game. Think it's time to sharpen the saw now. Throw those warm fuzzies out the door. You don't go to war with warm milk and cookies. Dan Wolken tweeted that out. Yahoo Sports senior writer joins us. And now, are we sure, Dan? I don't know what the rules are for going to war with warm milk and cookies, but what do you make of Cignetti's quote?
Well, I don't know. Those chocolate chips can be dangerous, right? You eat too many of them, maybe that's how you win the game. Overfeed your opposition. No, listen, Indiana, I think they have been getting gassed up the last week and a half. And I think Curt Cignetti is a little bit concerned that, after two great performances and everybody thinking that they're a big favorite in this game, that maybe there's a little bit of a letdown. The guy thinks of everything. He guards against complacency. That's what he learned from the Nick Saban school of coaching college football. And we'll see. Yesterday, I'm sure they got an absolute butt kicking at practice from Curt Cignetti, and we'll see if that translates to a big performance tonight.
There is so much about Curt Cignetti that is so incredibly Saban-esque. But when Saban retired, the conversation became, okay, now who is the best coach in college football? I think we could talk about Ryan Day at Ohio State. We could talk about Kirby Smart at Georgia. If Indiana wins the national championship tonight, will Curt Cignetti be viewed as the best coach in college football?
Well, he's definitely going to be in line to be one of the highest paid coaches in college football because there is a clause in his contract, the one he just agreed to a couple months ago, that he's got to be in the top three of coaching salaries in the country if he meets certain standards, which they've already met. So Curt Cignetti is going to get a big pay bump regardless of what happens here. As far as whether we consider him the best coach in college football, Smart still got 2 national championships. So does Dabo Swinney, although Clemson's been in the gutter the last few years. Listen, I think that the job he's done over 2 seasons to get Indiana to this point, no question, it's the best turnaround in college football history. Is he the best coach in college football? Let's see a little longer sample size. Even if they win the Natty tonight, they're going to come back next year and there's going to be big expectations. We'll see how they manage it.
Think back to where we were a year ago in Indiana when people were sort of saying, it was cute, but let's see it sustained. Now they're even better this year. Is this the beginning of a moment that you think can last for several years for Indiana?
They've got the investment. Mark Cuban, notably, and some other big billionaires who are Indiana alums have gone all the way in terms of their investment in their belief in Curt Cignetti, and they've given a lot of money. They've gotten great players out of the transfer portal. Josh Hoover is going to be their quarterback next year, a transfer from TCU. They paid a lot of money to get him and some other guys. So, look, I think they're going to keep it rolling in the sense that they'll be a contender, especially in the Big Ten. But is everything going to come together the way it has this year with the experience and the chemistry and the right quarterback? And that's hard. The stars have to align, and they certainly did this year for Indiana. But whether you can do it year after year, I think college football right now, there's so much parity. It's hard to be at that great highest level every single year.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair to question if a dynasty, or at least a Saban-esque dynastic run, is even possible in today's college football.
Yeah, I don't think so. Look, the rules now, and everybody's got this revenue share cap that they're ignoring, and nobody knows, if there's limits to how much you can spend on a roster. So everyone's kind of freewheeling it, but the talent is getting spread around for sure. And I just don't think that you can stockpile the depth. When Nick Saban was at his peak, they had 5 stars upon 5 stars upon 5 stars in recruiting classes, guys who were buried on the depth chart, playing on the scout team in the program 2-3 years before they ever got a chance to play. That's not happening now because of the portal. Guys want to play. They go somewhere for a year. They don't get the experience they wanted. They leave and go somewhere else. So I just don't think you can compile the depth to have a dynastic run like that. That's why you got to maximize. And I think that's one thing you can say about Curt Cignetti is he is a maximizer. They're going to have ebbs and flows, ups and downs. Who knows how long he even wants to coach? He's in his mid-60s at this point. But for the next 5 years, I think you look at Indiana and say, yeah, if they win tonight, they're not going anywhere. But can you really expect them to win another championship? One team wins the title every year. It's hard to do.
All right, Dan, you are in Miami. I've heard a lot about the expected home field advantage, but I'm struggling, the math nerd that I am, when tickets were allocated to Miami and tickets were allocated to Indiana and tickets were allocated to sponsors. So this is not your normal game. Do you expect there to be a large home field advantage for Miami tonight?
No, I actually think there may be more Indiana fans in the crowd. You look at the ticket prices, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 just to sort of get in the door. And Indiana fans have traveled throughout this whole playoff. They took over the Rose Bowl. They took over Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta last week. And I don't know that they'll take over this venue tonight, but I think they will be very much in big numbers because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Indiana fans, by the way, and as I'll tell you, they have the largest living alumni fan base in the country. So there's a lot of Indiana folks out there. They've been itching for an opportunity like this, and I don't think they're going to spare any expense to get in the door. I know there's going to be a lot of Miami people there as well. I think there's a lot of Miami fans who are actually flying into town just to experience this game in Miami, even if they can't get in the stadium. I've heard a lot about that. So, but when you allocate the tickets the way they have, like you said, 20,000 for each school, 25,000 in the middle, a lot of it corporate designated. It's all about that secondary market, and I think Indiana right now is hard to beat there.
Yeah, you're going to need some corporate assistance for some of the ticket prices that I've seen. I mean, $4, $5, $6, $7, $10,000 just to get into the stadium. It is outrageous. But Dan, I feel like so much of our conversation about the national championship game is dominated by Indiana storylines. And look, it's nothing short of miraculous, the turnaround that Curt Cignetti has done there. But let's acknowledge that there's another side of this game as well, too, in Miami. What does Miami have to do to defend home turf and win a national championship?
Yeah, well, I think if you talk to Miami and get their take on this game, what they would tell you is that they play a similar style to Indiana. Those two teams kind of want to do the same thing, which is dominate the line of scrimmage, run the ball, be opportunistic in the passing game, play action, limit turnovers, time of possession, all that sort of fundamental stuff. And they feel like they have more talent. They feel like they have better players in the trenches, player for player, recruit for recruit. Miami's got more than Indiana. That's the way they think of this. Now, listen, the issue for Miami in a lot of these games has been penalties, turnovers. They're not the most buttoned up operation. They are mistake prone at times. And they're going to have to play a very clean game. If they do that, I think they will be right there and they may even win. But the question is, can they? Can they be mistake-free or as close to it as possible on a big stage? They certainly were not against Ole Miss. They let Ole Miss hang around and almost win that game because of their mistakes. But if you go earlier in the playoff against Ohio State, they were really, really good. And I think for the 3, 4, 5 weeks before that, I thought they played pretty clean. So which Miami team are we going to get tonight? That's going to determine it. But their point of view, and they're not wrong, player for player, they have more talent.
All right, so if we live in this world where Miami has a shot at winning the national championship, like tomorrow morning, Miami might be national champions, which means they would have won a national championship before they ever won the ACC. Can we now finally acknowledge that conference titles just don't matter?
Oh, I think we've always known that, at least in the recent era of the college football playoff, because you've had this crazy expansion of conferences. And what we've seen since the Big Ten went to 18 teams and the ACC's got, what they've got, 17 teams, you cannot have a true conference champion because the tiebreakers are all weird and wacky. The schedules are extremely different. You don't have the best teams always playing the best teams. There are teams like Texas A&M and the SEC this year that sort of played a really weak schedule. They got all the bottom feeders, and that sort of let them rise to the top. And so, yeah, like conference championships, it's nice to win, and certainly it gives you an automatic entry into the playoff for most of these leagues, but it just doesn't really mean what it used to mean. And Miami got caught in a bad tiebreaker situation in the ACC, and they weren't allowed to play in that game. but they were clearly the best team, and we all knew in real time they were the best team in the ACC. So, they need to fix the tiebreakers for sure, but the bottom line is the problem is the conferences are just too darn big.
I have been accused of being an SEC homer, so allow me to play into that and bring the SEC into all of this. This is now the third year in a row where an SEC team is not represented in the national championship. I mean, the Big Ten has an opportunity to win 3 consecutive national championships going back to Ohio State last year and Michigan the year before. Is the SEC as we know it dead?
No. I mean, look, the SEC is going to be fine, and they've got a lot of good programs, and they're all doing what they can competitively. But it does speak to right now, the Big Ten does have programs at the top of their league who are doing a great job financially with the transfer portal, getting the guys they need to get. Now, that doesn't mean the SEC isn't spending money. I mean, look at what LSU is doing right now in the portal under Lane Kiffin. They're going to have one of the highest priced rosters in the country next year, and the SEC will come back around and I'm sure win a bunch of national championships. But these things are somewhat cyclical. Some of the legacy SEC programs have seen their advantages disappear or at least dissipate in this new era of NIL and transfer portal. Like I said before, they can't stack the talent like they used to. And the Big Ten teams have a great chance in recruiting to go national because a lot of them, all of them really, have huge financial wherewithal. So again, it's just about the talent spreading around. The big thing I think in the SEC that concerns me is the coaching, because especially you look this year with a lot of the new hires that were made across the SEC, a lot of group of 5 and sort of inexperienced coaches that are gambles. Alex Golish at Auburn, it's a gamble. Florida with John Summerall, it's a bit of a gamble. How are they going to translate to that level? Ryan Silverfield at Arkansas, same thing. So I think you look at the coaching at the top of the Big Ten, there is an advantage there, and I think that plays out at least on the margins.
So you're speaking to a recalibrated SEC and an understanding that modern college football is just going to be this way. Do you think that SEC schools, fans, administrators will catch up to that logic, or do we still see rash reactionary firings constantly for a lack of national championships when that might not be a realistic expectation?
Well, 3 years in a row to not have a team in the national championship game is definitely a wake-up call, I think, for a lot of people in the SEC. But I don't think fundamentally you can look at it and say, oh, they're screwing this up or they're doing a bad job or they don't understand this era. I don't think that's really true. I think some of it is just circumstantial. You're dealing with some bad hires from the last 5 years that are sort of getting cycled through and cleaned out. And, again, like the margins are not that big. Georgia was not that far away from beating Ole Miss and maybe beating Miami. Like, in a different world, Georgia could have won this whole thing, but it's a playoff. You got to win 4 rounds, and the margins are small, and you're going to be in close games, and it's just not always going to go your way. And I think that's the statement here. This is not the BCS where you pick 2 teams, play the national championship, and because of the SEC's reputation, a lot of times they get the benefit of the doubt. Now you have to go play it. 5 SEC teams made the playoff. It just so happened that at the top end, they were marginally not as good as the Big Ten teams.
All right, Dan, before we get you out of here, you are in Miami. You will be at the national championship game tonight. Who is your pick to ultimately hoist the CFP trophy?
Yeah, I've sort of been in the Indiana camp really kind of ever since the Rose Bowl. Maybe I'm being prisoner of the moment. Maybe I'm not giving enough credence to the fact that they're going to come down to earth at some point, and maybe it's tonight and they don't play their best game. That's certainly all possible. So I don't discount Miami as having a great chance to win. I just think if Indiana carries what they've had from the Rose Bowl to the Peach Bowl to this game, they're going to be hard to stop. They don't make a lot of mistakes, typically. And if they have that kind of night, I think they are going to win this game and stamp a national title that is really going to stand out in history just for how unexpected it was 2 years ago.
It's absolutely going to be wild. Dan, be safe in Miami. Enjoy the chaos of it all. Enjoy the game. Be sure to let me know how great you think Fernando Mendoza is. We appreciate your time as always, Dan. Thanks for hanging out with us. Enjoy Miami.
Appreciate y'all. Thank you.